morning and welcome to the Investment Migration Report.
Today we have joining us Bob Kraft, CEO and founder of First Pathway Partners. Welcome, Bob. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. My pleasure, Abteen. Great to be with you.
So, Bob, my first EB5 conference, I think it was about 10 years ago, you were receiving an IA-29 award. And I remember thinking to myself, that may be 5-6 more years before I could possibly have an IA-29 application filed for an investor. So I know you've been involved in EB5 for a long time. Could you just tell us a little bit of how long you've been involved in EB5 and how it was that you got involved in EB5 in the first place?
Yeah, be pleased to. I actually started in involvement with EB5 in 2004, 2005, began doing research into the industry, the business. I was running a software development company at the time, but was involved with economic development in the state of Wisconsin and spending time overseas. And it came to my attention as a very, very attractive way to help people immigrate to the United States. We started the company. I sold the software development company in 2006, transitioned a year, and then started full time with First Pathway Partners, which we founded in 2007. So it's been interesting. It's a great business. The folks that we work with, and Abteen you work with, and everybody in the industry are very interesting people. They share some similar perspectives and objectives, for their family and their lives, and they're obviously interested in the United States. They've been very successful, and it's been an honor to be involved in the industry.
When you look at the financial press, they're always focused on the negatives of EB5. But we all in the industry, we know all the positives of EB5. How many families would you guess over the years you've helped immigrate to the United States in those timeframes?
Yeah, that's a great. It's in the thousands. I mean, we've been. We're not one of the larger players in the industry, although I would say we're in the top 5 in terms of success, and I measure success by 526 conditional green card issuance, and then 829 issuance, as you said, Abteen, and then the ultimate. But not everybody wants to pursue citizenship, and I understand that because of different treaties with different countries. But and then capital return. So the 3 things that are most important, and we kind of keep at the top of our focus is the 526 approvals, 829, and then returning capital when it's time. And we've been successful on all 3. So we have a 100% track record on 829s. We've helped thousands of families come into the country. As I said, we're not the largest, but I think we're really in the top 5 in terms of performance, which that's more important to me than being the biggest or one of the biggest.
And and since inception, I mean, obviously a lot has changed in the EB5 business. Maybe just a couple of minutes on what your thoughts are and all the different change and how EB5 has evolved since 2004, 2007 when you first got started.
Well, the big change, and it's been really kind of a constant, is just the herky-jerkiness of the industry. When the program was established in 1990, and Senator Kennedy was the main sponsor, Ted Kennedy from Massachusetts, the program really didn't get any traction at all. So they modified and introduced the EB5 pilot program, and it was on a 5-year authorization at that point. And that created the regional center program, lowered the minimum amount, made it easier on job creation counts, and it just made sense. But the program really, as you know, Abteen, didn't get any velocity probably until the 2000s, the mid 2000s, when people overseas began to understand the opportunity there. It's a very complicated program, so I think part of it was the industry educating the market with respect to the opportunity there. And while it seems complicated, if you look at it, if you're with the right provider, like the organization you work with, or we're very proud of what we've done. And there are a lot of really good regional centers that understand the program and the importance of protecting the investor. Then it's really a great way to come into the United States and relatively inexpensive compared to other country programs. Um, if you have good lawyers representing you and good representation from the regional center, it can be a fairly painless process. Now, it unfortunately has taken longer than any of us would like. And then as the program kind of moved with velocity, we started running into extension issues. And the program was renewed, and sometimes it would be a 3-year renewal, sometimes two. We even had, you remember the one period there, we had a couple 1 month renewals. There were like 19 renewals over the last few years, and that's an issue. So IIUSA, which is the organization that represents the international community on EB5, that you're a board member of, and I'm the president of. We've been working tirelessly to bring some sanity to the renewals and to permanently authorize the program with some changes that would address integrity reforms and make the program more practical, more protective of the investor, eliminate some of the bad actors that have gotten into EB5 on the regional center side, and just make it an even better program. The program has been very successful for the country. It's been good for the investors, but it could be improved. It's like any new business, if you will. People make mistakes. Some people have a tendency to take advantage of it when there's some soft spots from a regulatory standpoint, and that's true of financial services or insurance or manufacturing, pharmaceuticals. It happens. It doesn't mean the program's not good. It just needs to be tweaked a little bit. So probably the biggest things that I've experienced are just some of the uncertainties tied to legislative, expirations. The growth of the program has been really exciting. We work with 44 different countries actively. We have investors from 44 different countries, and we have representation all over the world. And the markets have changed, as you know. China was the big market for a long time. And the agents there, they saw the opportunity. They saw it like we saw it. They learned the program, they embraced it, they turned it into a very successful business. In many cases, I would say most cases, they were already in the immigration program. They probably started with the Canadian program and then saw the opportunity for the United States, which is, Canada's a great country. I mean, there are many, many great opportunities out there. We've never said the United States is the best choice. We believe that, but I mean, based on a country, based on a family situation, there are other good programs out there. So the Canadian program was a good program, but our agents would tell us that, really, the United States is where most people really want to immigrate to. So they jumped on that. They developed the infrastructure, really good marketing practices in many cases. Some of them became really true powerhouses, very successful. And the downside of the success was they exhausted all the visas that were available and forced retrogression on the market. And of course, we've worked hard as an industry to address the derivative issue, to free up more visas, to get more visas, and we've been unsuccessful thus far. But I mean, there's been a lot of twists and turns, but overall, it's been a very, very interesting ride for me. It's probably the most rewarding thing I've ever done. I've been in business 45 years. I can't even tell you how many companies I've built, sold, how many boards I've been on internationally. And this has probably been the best time of my business career, this being involved in the EB5 industry and working with very successful, interesting people from all over the world.
Nice. And I actually, at Step Global, which is my company, we actually do the Canadian program as well, the current state of the Canadian program. I know it's a lot different from before, but sort of the equivalent to what the EB5 program is. And definitely the EB5 program does continue to be really popular so long as it remains accessible to people. For example, when the price went up back in November 2019, it wasn't as accessible as the Canadian equivalent. So that's where the interest sort of shifted to Canada a little bit more. But you also mentioned, there's been a lot of short-term reauthorizations over the years, a lot of negotiations, a lot of proposed bills. What do you think the main issues are where the industry's been unable to sort of come up with a long-term reauthorization, or at least a little bit more stability and certainty for investors to depend on, so that they could see that the EB5 program is actually a good, stable program and opportunity for immigration to the U.S.?
Yeah, I mean, I think really the biggest issue, and I've spent a tremendous amount of time on this. In fact, I would say that I'm more into lobbying now and working on reauthorization than I am running my business, which fortunately we have a really good staff that's developed over the last 13 years. So, we're very solid there. So it's allowed me to spend more time on it and meet with the different groups that are interested and active in EB5 that may have different perspectives on the program. I honestly think the differences aren't that large, or aren't that many, I should say, but they are significant. And the early differences really centered around, in my opinion, the TEA definition. The program prior to the regulations that were introduced in 2019 allowed for creative TEA qualification. We call it gerrymandering. Perfectly legal. Nothing wrong with it. The states were able to authorize an area, and if you had the right political connections and or the governor of the state was interested in economic development in an area, even though it didn't qualify under the original spirit of the program, they could properly authorize it, and that was fine. And some of the very, very large developers in the United States, they're very smart. They have great legal teams. They have great economists. And they said, hey, this is a great opportunity for capital raises at a lower cost than traditional markets. So, you do the math and you say, hey, we got to figure out how to make this thing work. And they put a lot of smart people on it. They figured out how to build EB5 projects in very, very desirable cities with high name recognition. And because of the financial muscle they had, they were able to consume a large percentage of the visas that were available, especially in China. So I remember having a meeting in Geneva, Switzerland, a number of years ago with the head of one of these companies, and I said, "Hey, congratulations! You guys have done a great job. You've done it, properly with integrity. You've consumed all the visas available on the market and forced it into retrogression, and you put us all out of business. Way to go! You did it professionally, and I'm sure their investors will be fine. But that was not the original intent of the law. When the law was established in 1990 and then modified in 92 with the EB5 pilot program, the intent was to drive economic growth in areas that really needed it. Not in Manhattan, not in Chicago downtown on the Miracle Mile, not in Los Angeles, not in areas that were already very, very successful and could find traditional financing. The idea was to bring money into cities that were struggling and with high urban unemployment and benefit those communities. So no one envisioned that this thing would kind of morph the way it did. So those companies, and to their credit, and again, they did everything right. They're very smart. Kind of wrecked the industry in terms of the availability of visas from certain countries that became backlog retrogressed, and really impacted the smaller operators that were doing it in the way I think that was more consistent with what Congress envisioned. I've argued that we have a sister company that does nothing but new market tax credits, which is a program managed by the Treasury. And the new market tax credit program is interesting in that the government in that program is also providing incentive financial support through new market tax credits into high unemployment areas, rural areas, but the credits are allocated across the country with a focus on making sure that allocations are kind of proportioned across the country into all areas. So no one state or no one city receives an inordinate amount of credits. So it really benefits the whole country. And Abteen, I think we've even talked about this, that I'm not advocating necessarily for the new market tax credit formula for EB5 for the TEAs, but it would be interesting, and I tried to get some traction with this, if the government looked at EB5 kind of in the same way and said, look, no one city, no one region is going to dominate this program. We have a finite number of visas available, so why don't we allocate them across so that every state, every region has a certain opportunity, and they're not impacted because it's versus New York City or Miami or whatever.
So, Bob, when we first started out in the EB5 industry, I think there were only a few competing programs, maybe Canada, Australia, and the UK. And today, I don't even know how many competing programs there are. There's probably north of 40 of them. And I know every year you get invited to Geneva to meet with other investment migration programs. I think while in the US and Congress, we've been fighting about if there's more money going to California or New York and other states, now there's no money going to any of those states, and all the money that we're competing against is going to these other countries. Could you spend a couple minutes maybe talking about the various different programs and your thoughts about the competition that we have in the marketplace for investment migration?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as I said, the Canadian program has probably been one of the earliest, and it's a really good program. And Canada's great. I actually worked for a Canadian company during my career, and my family has roots in Toronto. So we migrated from Ireland to Toronto to the United States, and I mean we're all from somewhere else here in the United States if you go back far enough, which that's one of the attractive parts of the country. But the Canadian program is a really good program. You're right; they're north of 40 programs. I tell people, all the programs have their attractive aspects to them, and then again, it depends on what your objectives are as a family. The programs that are tied into the EU, that's attractive to some people because you can travel. They may be comfortable with that part of the world, which is a beautiful part of the world. I mean, I would never diss any program. I think the U.S. program, once we get our act together and we are back in business and we have some clarity, we can compete against anybody, but that doesn't mean we're going to get everybody. Australia is a great country. I've been privileged to be able to travel the world and see different cultures and different countries and meet people. And, I love America. It's a great country, but I mean, there are a lot of great countries out there. And then again, depending on what a family's objectives are, what they're interested in for their family, children. I always say, the United States, and sometimes they refer to it as the excited states because it's crazy, and the way it's presented globally, with all the movies and the violence and the craziness. I think people that haven't spent time here have a misperception of what life is really like in the United States. It's a great country. It's the largest economy in the world. Unlimited educational opportunities. Unlimited power. There's just so many reasons for people to come here, and people want to come here. I mean, we're seeing it now at the southern border, which is a disaster because people, are trying to get in from however they can get into the country, which hopefully they'll control that. But the other programs have positive aspects. And if I were in your business, the migration agency representing multiple countries, I mean, that's what I would do. I would represent multiple countries, and because not it's like the EB5 program. The good agents that are selling the United States are presenting multiple opportunities, multiple regional center opportunities, because not everybody likes a hotel project, or not everybody's interested in an office building or condominium projects. So, I think you just put your best foot forward and, let people make an informed decision, be there for them, be professional, support them. And at the end of the day, once we get the program reauthorized, which we will here soon, I'm very confident of that. And once we are able to put aside the differences, going back to the earlier question, within the industry, which at this point are kind of small. I mean, I think we've come very close as an industry to saying, you know what, we've got to stop these kind of turf battles, and, for the good of the program, this side will give on some issues, our side will give on some issues, and we'll come to a full resolution and agreement to move things forward, and then we'll be back in business. And even if the price point's a little higher than it had been at 500,000, there are people out there that'll be willing to invest that additional amount to come to the United States. Some won't. They'll go to Canada, they'll go to Australia, the UK, Malta, wherever, and that's fine. I mean, again, it's a decision a family has to make as a unit. And some of the cultures, you're very well aware, Abteen, it's not just the husband and wife. I mean, it is the extended family that gets involved in the decisions, because you're talking about maybe uprooting the first group that's ever left the country and going to the United States. And families are very, very important. They are here. My family, I mean, those are big decisions. So for many people, they say, well, why do we have to go across the other side of the world, the United States? Maybe we go to Malta, or we go to Portugal. It's closer, it's easier to get to. So, it's a long answer to the question, but it's a very, very personal decision, clearly. And, I think it's driven by the objectives that a family might have long term, and more than anything. And there are a lot of good choices out there.
I think I've been working with investors for about 8 years directly now here in the UAE and across the GCC in India and Africa. And, one of the main reasons, which you must have experienced as well, why people want to go to the US, like you mentioned, is the limitless educational opportunities. So I find that with our clients, one of the main reasons they're doing this is for their kids and for their educational opportunities. But one of the things or a couple of the things that I think people compare when they're looking at other programs as well, for example, the Portugal program or the UK program, or even the Quebec program, for example, which is now on hold, but which was available before, is the risk factor. So, USCIS has made it clear that this is an at-risk investment with the EB5 program, and people view that they have less control over their investment and their money. And that's the bit that scares them. Whereas in places like Portugal, where they can just invest in a property, or in Canada, where they're investing in government bonds, they see that as a more secure investment. And I think that's one of the barriers to the program. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree with you 100%. The U.S. program must be at risk. Um, and, again, going back to the original establishment of the law, the perspective was, if you're willing to think like an entrepreneur, put your capital at risk, create 10 American jobs to benefit the country, uh, then we will, in exchange for that, provide passage into the United States. So, the congressional representatives and the senators that passed it, we're a country of entrepreneurs. The country was built on immigrants coming into this country, taking significant, tremendous risk, in building arguably one of the strongest countries in the history of the world. The economy is clearly number one. People say, well, yeah, China's going to overtake you. We'll see about that. It could happen. Certainly we're going to be rivaled, but it was built on the backs of very, very strong people that were willing to take a risk. So the thinking back then was, if we can find more people like that, we'll build an even better country, create more opportunity for our citizens, and that's a good thing. So for people that are entrepreneurial and want to participate in the largest economy in the world and have the best educational opportunities in the world, yeah, there's a risk, and it's a requirement of the government. Because if you want a guaranteed kind of thing, then you weigh that against, well, okay, so my money's not at risk, but what do I end up with? Do I have an opportunity to participate in the largest economy in the world, the largest educational system in the world, unlimited geographic opportunities depending on the weather that you like? It's all in the United States. You've got the deserts, you've got the swamplands, you've got warmth, you've got the hard cold of the Midwest and the North where I live, which I love. Uh, because you've got the four seasons, and you can travel to all those regions. So it's a wonderful place to go. But if somebody's not comfortable with the risk, that's okay. That's okay. So take a more sure path, and they'll have a great life. And maybe it's more in tune with their mentality. And there's nothing wrong with that. So again, as I said earlier, everybody has different motivations and different things that drive them. Um, the program was intended for risk takers. And in exchange for that risk, you have an opportunity to participate in the American dream. Not
So,
for
Bob, I'm going to ask a few questions here in a minute about just the legislative front, and I'm confident that we're going to get a bill done, and EB5 will come back and it'll be strong as ever. But before I jump into that, we have a lot of audience members from various parts of the world that are listening to this. If someone that was looking for the EB5 program, when it comes back in the next couple of months, what would be the advice that you give them when they're trying to decide on what type of project to invest in or how to evaluate those projects?
Well, our advice is, and it's kind of through years of experience. You know, People, as they look at different programs, well, first off, they should look at multiple programs and multiple regional centers. And I encourage investors to look at the track record of the people that are providing the EB5 opportunity. I mean, to me, history repeats itself. That's most important. I said earlier, we're not the largest in the business, but we're one of the most successful. We spent an inordinate amount of time on making sure the projects that we present to the marketplace are well vetted. We look at hundreds of projects before we put one out. They're as conservative as they can be. So we do everything we can to eliminate the risk, even though technically it's got to be an at-risk investment. Any business investment is at risk. So I would encourage people to work with their agent or their attorneys and look at multiple programs, but dig into the background of the regional center operator and the principals that are involved with it. Then I suggest to people that this is something that you probably ought to look at business opportunities, EB5 opportunities, and maybe have a little familiarity with so you can get more comfortable with it. So if somebody's involved with the hospitality industry, they may be more comfortable with a hotel type investment because they understand from a business standpoint how it works. If they're from a manufacturing background, their opportunities in manufacturing. I mean, that's kind of the beauty of EB5. There's a wide range of investments people can make. Housing, condominiums, multi-use developments, business towers. So again, based on your background, personal background, and comfort level, that's another thing we kind of encourage. So, and then I would check. I encourage people to check references. We provide, and I'm sure you do as well, Abteen investor references. If somebody is from a particular country, they'd like to talk to somebody from their country who's been through the process. We have, a lot of investors that are very happy and from all countries around the world, and we make sure that they can just talk one-on-one. What was it like? What was the experience like? The other thing that I recommend to people is make sure that the legal representation, that their credentials are solid. There are a lot of attorneys that have gotten into EB5 that really don't know what they're doing. And it's true of everything. They saw it as an opportunity when it was really growing. Check the references and the history, the track record of the lawyers, because the lawyers, and we have a whole cadre of lawyers that we've worked with successfully that are well known in the industry, and we'll recommend those lawyers. But if somebody has their own attorney or would like to use someone else, that's fine. We just suggest that they make sure that those individuals are qualified and experienced and have had success with EB5, because if you get the right attorneys, it can be a very seamless process for the investor. If you get the wrong one, because of the filing requirements and the complexity of what has to go into the government, it can be a nightmare. And that's where a lot of people get into trouble. So it's kind of the total package. So I encourage people to take their time, think about it, make sure all their family members are involved in the decision making, which is, it's a cultural thing. It's different in every country, but I think it's important to get feedback and other eyes on it, and then check references. So, but most importantly, going back to the history of the regional center, the track record, and I wouldn't look so much at the location. Is it a city you recognize? That doesn't necessarily mean it's a good program. And unfortunately, a lot of people have been attracted to named cities, thinking, well, it's got to be great because it's whatever. That's not necessarily the right investment to make. So you got to dig deeper than that, I guess.
So going back to what you just mentioned about the cities, a lot of people are attracted to projects that are in Los Angeles or New York or Chicago or places that they recognize, obviously. And as someone who is always presenting projects to investors, that's something I found. It's difficult to convince an investor that a project in a rural area is a good idea. And we were talking a little bit about TEAs. So there's always been some contention around the topic of TEAs, where there's one school of thought where that a job is a job, and if the project is creating jobs, then that's all that should matter. Whereas others would like to go back to the original premise of the program, which was to bring more funds and job creation into more rural areas. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, again, it goes back to the viability of the investment to begin with, regardless of where it is. I mean, I think if the regional center is really doing their job, they're not going to introduce a program, whether it's in a TEA under the new regulations that were just suspended, but the tighter regulations, or a rural area. If they're doing their job, that program has to be viable from a financial standpoint. So there, and that should be explained properly by the regional center. Rural projects, TEA projects can be in true TEA areas as originally envisioned, can be very successful and very impactful to a city or to a community. So I guess, again, it goes back to who's representing the project, who's put it together, making sure you go through the business plan thoroughly, that it makes sense economically, that there's rationale for why it's there. It's not just to create jobs and then have the program collapse. So you may end up, achieving your 829 because the jobs were created, but then you lose all your money. Now, there may be some investors that don't care about that. They are very wealthy people, and they just see it as a rounding error in their personal situation. We don't look at it that way. We look at every nickel as precious, so we want to repay everybody in full. So the projects we put out, I would invest in. They make sense from a financial standpoint. They're viable. They make sense. They're going to work long term. And one of the advantages we have is because I'm not an attorney. I'm not an immigration person. I was a business executive for 40 plus years, building companies, running large international companies. So I kind of came up through the large corporate structures and learned, how things operate, business background degree, and just pretty much done everything in manufacturing, software development, et cetera, in terms of job responsibilities, including running the organizations from a financial standpoint. So my perspective was always more on running successful businesses, participating at the board level, helping international companies. I was on publicly traded companies internationally. You kind of see how things operate and what to do, what not to do, and what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. So we've always tried to apply a very basic premise to everything we do, is that it's got to be viable. It doesn't matter where it is. It has to be viable from a business standpoint. And then if you can layer in the EB5 aspect of it and benefit people from overseas, then you've got a home run. And that's pretty much what we've done.
So, Bob, you mentioned that you spend a lot of time on the lobbying effort, just as much time as you do on your day job. I would actually say that you probably have two full-time jobs, because I know you've been working tirelessly on this legislative front the last 6-7 years. And, this last time around, I mean, at the end of June, I think we've actually had made more progress than ever in history, where we've got two identical bills in the House and the Senate, with 3 co-sponsors on the Senate side and 25 co-sponsors on the House side, and we never got it done. So I know a lot of our audience are interested in finding out, well, what's going to happen with EB5. I know you're spending a lot of time on the back end working with the various Senate staffers and stakeholders in the business. Maybe, if you don't mind, just kind of give the audience a synopsis of what's happening and what you think is going to happen over the next couple months.
Yeah, I'd be glad to. And sure, and you're right, Abteen, there's been a lot of time spent on it by a lot of people, including you as a board member of IIUSA. We were as close as we've ever been in June. As you said, we have companion bills that were identical in the Senate and the House of Representatives. We had 28 sponsors of the House bill and 3 very strong Senate sponsors. And then Senator Leahy, Senator Grassley went for unanimous consent. And if not for one objection, which came out of left field, we'd be back in business and there'd be no issue. But it happens. So the good news is that we have really unanimous support for the program in both the Senate and the House. The issues that have kind of delayed a long-term authorization and changes to the program really are from a few small groups that have had a lot of influence, but they also have come to the table recently since we had the expiration, and we're in dialogue with those groups and directly with Senator Schumer's office, who's a leader the Senate, and he's very supportive of the program. And Representative Nadler, who who's chair of the Judiciary Committee in the House, and very important to the program. And then across the country, we have congressional Senate support. So I think, I'm very confident we're going to get this done. We believe it'll probably be attached to the omnibus spending bill. I don't see a standalone bill. I mean, in a way, it was a good thing that they separated it, because it forced a dialogue that is leading to an improvement of the program and a long-term authorization. So IIUSA continues to work with the other groups that represent their constituents in passage of a new bill, and we're close, and we're talking pretty much on a daily basis. The Senate and the House are out right now, but they will be back here shortly. But we are working with their offices. The staff continues working in Washington, so we're very optimistic. And well, there's really no opposition. It's just it's kind of a crazy situation. Getting everybody lined up, and Washington is very difficult. I think everybody knows that, to get everybody on the same page and agree to something, and you have one small thing pop up and boom, it disrails it short term. But it is a short term disappointment. But we'll be back in business fully. We're working hard to add a grandfathering clause to the legislation, which would, if there's ever a disruption in the future, there would be no concern for the investors in terms of their rights. We don't believe that's an issue for those that are already into the program, but we want to make sure that we protect them, and we're pushing for derivative relief and the things that we need to do to protect the investors. And integrity reforms, everybody's in agreement on, which also protects the investor. So the focus has really been on the investor from the association and the other groups, to make sure that the program protects those people that take the risk that we talked about earlier, makes the program even better for them, gives them more comfort in coming to the United States. So there's a strong wind at our back, if you will, and momentum. I'm very optimistic. I'm an optimist by nature, but I'm also a realist. I think you have to balance the two. So we have some work to do, but we'll get there.
And we did touch on briefly, and you've been saying that you are the current president of the IIUSA Board of Directors, and of course, you're a 5-term president of the Board of Directors. And we've been talking on this program, even on other episodes, about some of the initiatives that IIUSA has been taking. But just to go back a little bit, what motivated you to take such an active role as a stakeholder in IIUSA?
Well, I joined the association in '07 when we had just a handful of members, because I thought it was important. I've always, in my business career, joined and been actively engaged in industry groups that represented the industry that I was active in. It's a great way to learn, and to be kind of knowledgeable, and network and understand where trends are, and what's coming next. I think it's like any business. If you're going to be in it and be successful, you have to go in with both feet and 150% commitment. And it was an easy decision to join the association. And then after a period of time, I was asked to run for the board of directors, which I was honored to do and was elected. And then it was probably 4 years later. I think I probably took a phone call in a board meeting, and when I came back, they told me, "Bob, we want you to be president next year." Yeah. And I said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, no," because it is a time-consuming thing, and that was, I'm kind of kidding a little bit, but it's important work. I believe in the industry. I believe in protecting investor rights. I believe in protecting our regional centers. We have some great regional center operators, and the industry is interesting in that it's not just the regional centers. At first, it's the investors at the top of the pyramid, if you will. They're most important. They drive the business. They're the client. And if we don't do a good job of meeting their expectations and delivering for them as the program is presented, then we failed. So we all try and keep that. We talk about that a lot at the conference meetings, and we all try and practice that. The good operators do. The regional centers themselves are then aggregators of unbelievable number of disciplines. So if you think about the business, the regional center is the organizer, supporting the client at the top, but they're organizing lawyers, and those lawyers are immigration lawyers. They're corporate business attorneys that are putting together the operating agreements. I mean, there's a whole taxation, accounting. There's a whole group of people that contribute to the success of a program. Then you have the developers and the construction companies, because most of the projects are new builds, and you've got a whole series of other services that support the ultimate project. So there's a lot of different factions. The impact of the regional center program and the number of people that are involved in it to make it successful is enormous. So while we talk about 10,000 visas a year, which are limited by family members, so if you say 3,300 packets, if you will, family packets, bringing in billions of dollars for EB5 investment, it's really, you can magnify that by 20-fold in terms of the overall impact and the involvement of the different groups that support a successful project and a successful industry. So for me, it's been a real honor to work with people like Abteen and our other board members, the leadership committee that supports it, our various members from around the world. IIUSA does a really good job of educating. That's one of our big focuses, to just best practices, making sure that the banking side of the business, which is also a big part of the industry, understands the program. Goes on and on and on, just to make sure everybody understands the importance of doing the right thing and doing it well. So to me, it's been very interesting because it's very complex. I like complex, and it's been very fulfilling. So I got involved because maybe from a personal standpoint, I wanted to learn more. So that maybe that's selfish, but I also wanted to be involved in protecting the industry and helping the industry move in a direction that's positive for the future, so that we can successfully compete against the UK and Canada and Malta and Portugal and Australia, the other programs, and have the best, most desirable program in the world.
So, Bob, a lot of our listeners probably don't know the details of how a bill becomes a law. It's one of those cartoons that I had to watch in law school. How does a bill become a law? But it's much easier to kill a bill than it is to take a bill from legislation to actually become law, and that's kind of the difficult part that we've been facing over the last 6 or 7 years. But I think for our audience that don't understand, I mean, I do believe we have 99% of the industry that want EB5 to survive and a new form of it to come, and they want integrity measures. But maybe just briefly talk about the various oppositions and what their thought process has been, and why we haven't been able to in the past get them on board, and why I think this time is different. I think we're all on the same page.
Well, I think early on the biggest objection was the TEA handling. And they successfully fought that through the court system. And they had the regulations that were introduced by USCIS in 2019 that increased the minimum amount from 500 to 900, and then tightened up the TEA program to single census tract. That was in place for a while, and then it was just recently put on hold and deemed inappropriate, because the secretary at the time was an acting secretary, and they very wisely, I guess, from their perspective, challenged it because the secretary hadn't been confirmed by the Senate. So they moved that out of the way now. Now, since then, I think that forced realization that something has to be done on TEAs that would be, I guess, would be tighter, would be more consistent with the original intent of the law. And that side of the industry, I don't believe that's an issue any longer. We've kind of gotten through that. But that was one of the things. They also will say that they believe that the legislation needed to address a few other areas that we didn't disagree with. Judicial review was one. We were actually promoting that as an addition to the whatever we end up with here to protect the investor. But we also felt that what was in the law, the current law that just expired, gave enough room for us to represent the rights of the investor. So it was kind of, now we're getting into kind of fine things. So when the program expired, then everybody went, "Oh no, we can't. This is not acceptable. We've got to get this back and forth." So that's forced a regular dialogue in a resolution on some of the small differences that had that 2%, I guess, if you will, Abteen, objecting, and let's just get this thing done and move it forward. And I think we've come far enough in the changes that had been recommended for the good of the industry, and we've all agreed. We're there now. Now it's time to move it forward. You're right, though. It's not easy to pass a bill. It's much easier for extensions if you're riding along a must-pass piece of legislation. For instance, the omnibus bill that authorizes the funding for the U.S. government for the whole thing for the next year, and then you just attach to that. Nobody's going to object to, these little Christmas tree ornaments, as they call them, and stop the whole economy or the whole government from being funded. So that's been an easier path. That has not given us what we'd really like, which is permanent authorization and or at least a 5-year authorization. They've kind of did the extensions short period of time. But I think most of that's behind us now. And in spite of all the difficulties, we're going to end up in a really good place.
Just one quick question. Do you think that this time, everyone's been you hear different things from different people in the industry, and everyone has sort of been saying to me that by September 30th, there will be, something will happen with the program. But many people are talking about a short-term authorization again until December. Do you think that that is something that's on the table? What's the likelihood of that happening?
Boy, I should kick that one to Abteen because that's a very difficult question. It's a good question. It's possible. No one wants another short-term authorization, but honestly, if it was an extension to the end of the month, with the end of the year, with the possibility of an improved, better program, I'd take it. But I think it's going to be longer than that. I really do. I think we'll see a minimum of a 3-year authorization. We're asking for a permanent authorization so that we don't have to go through this, every 6 months or every couple of years. That'd be good for the industry. The base program is permanent. The 1990 program, which authorized the EB-5 program, but doesn't allow for a job creation counting in a way that's practical for the large scale projects that people have done under the regional center program. So, let's make the regional center program permanent. That's kind of the logic. And I think Congress is actually at a point where they've seen the improvements that have been put forth that tighten up the program, provide better oversight to protect the investor. It's been good from an economic standpoint for the United States. These are quality people coming in the United States, so that's never been an issue. It's a good thing for the country. It's a plus to the country from a Treasury Department standpoint. It is not a drain. These people then come in and they buy houses and send their children to school, and it's all plus. So I think we're at a point where we have a shot to get a perhaps permanent, but longer than a few months. But if, from a technical standpoint, somebody said that's all you got, I'd take it. I don't know about you, Abteen. I don't want that, but and I don't think that's going to happen. But Washington, you just don't know.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were banking on the short-term reauthorization. And, when you mentioned 19 reauthorization, there was one as short as 6 days, I believe. But everyone just assumed that, this would happen. But, the co-sponsors of the bill, that didn't happen, Senators Leahy and Grassley, along with Senator Coons, they stripped this from the omnibus specifically to make sure that either that their bill gets passed or it doesn't get extended. And so I think the chances of a short-term reauthorization of a clean bill is probably not very likely. But the other part, I think, Bob, you can address this, but everyone has all these wants. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what we all want. It matters what the members of the Senate agreed to, and the people that are very close, and like yourself, that have been negotiating with Senate staffers and on the lobbying front. What things that are possible and what things are just politically impossible. And I think the people that are not involved on the legislative front, they just assume that they could just have their wish list and ask for everything. Maybe, if you don't mind, wrapping up with that thought.
Yeah, no, no, it's true. And what is that old saying? Oh gosh, the perfect is looking for the perfect is the enemy of progress or whatever. I mean, I mean, and I'm sorry that I'm struggling with that. But the idea being that, yeah, we all would like a lot of different things, but the reality is, it's not going to happen. So, and I think part of the problem both sides have had, I mean, both sides, the two factions within the industry that have gotten a lot closer together. I mean, we thought we were together a year and a half ago, and but there were some things that they wanted that we disagreed with. We didn't think they'd be a big issue, but they insisted on that, and we had some things we wanted. So you could say all the groups that have been negotiating on behalf of the industry maybe overreached a little bit in terms of what reality is from a congressional standpoint. So that's life, right? I mean, sometimes you see things that you'd like to have, but it's just not practical because of timing or whatever the reason might be. So you reset your expectations. You step back and say, okay, what can get done? If we get the programming authorized and we have the basic issues addressed, even though we'd all like to have a more perfect program or address some issues, some pet issues that people have, it's not going to happen. That's just not the way life is. That's not the way it works from a political standpoint. Believe me, reality has set in with us. And I think on all the factions, including the members of Congress, they said, we can get this, and this done, but that's a non-starter. Don't even go there. So, that's compromise is an art for sure. And that's kind of where we are right now. But I think the things that we cannot get that we'd like to get, I mean, we'd love to have 50,000 visas. We really would. And we pushed hard for derivative relief, which would open up the program and protect some of the retrogress countries. We're continuing to push for that. We may be able to get that. We're not going to get 50,000 visas. I mean, right now in the United States, immigration is probably one of the hottest topics, most controversial topics. I see no movement on an overall immigration address, if you will, from a congressional standpoint in the next many years, even though they all talk about it. It's just not going to happen. So at one time, we thought that maybe we'd be part of a bigger package that would address some of the things that we have concerns with. But that's a pipe dream. That's just not going to happen. It's not realistic. So I think we're at a good place right now. Our supporters in the House and in the Senate, and we're working with parties on both sides of the aisle. It's not a Democrat-Republican thing for the EB-5 program. It's supported across both sides. It's been great for communities across the country. IIUSA has done a really good job of working with various coalitions. If you go on the website of IIUSA, you'll see what the association has brought together in terms of support for the program. And it's builders groups, it's unions, it's teachers groups, it's anybody that has benefited from EB5, and it's really the whole country supports the program continuing. So I feel good about where we are, but you're right, Abteen. I mean, maybe asking for too much. Maybe we did that. Maybe they did that. Doesn't matter. We've all kind of, come to a point where I think we're in agreement that this is realistic based on what we're hearing from the politicians. And we need to get this reauthorized. And that's a belief in Washington as well. We need this program. It's a good program, and it will get reauthorized.
Well, Bob, it's been wonderful speaking with you and having you on the show. Thank you so much, and thank you for everything you do for the industry and for IIUSA.
Oh, thank you, Abteen. I appreciate it, and very nice to meet you. And look for. And you're in Dubai.
Yes, I'm in Dubai. So anytime you're here, just let me know.
I look forward to meeting you at some point in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Have a great week.
Thank you, Bob.